And this is where I guess what I'm saying is this is the death of Scrum as we know it today. And there'll be overseers in the immediate future, but jump ahead to 2035, if not earlier, I don't think there'll be any Scrum team left in companies that embrace this technology. That's where I think it's going.
It's that entrepreneur who has the idea in the first instance is the one that's going to be using the agents. It's not a developer. It's that entrepreneur that is sitting there going, I just had a really cool idea and I'm going to work with these agents and then I'm going to put the thing out there and I'm going to create value in that way. So I don't need to do it. Your location becomes agnostic almost instantly.
An example I gave before was open an email and send it to Kevin at the start of this. That's my own personal agent. Now this agent could be proprietary to me. No one else has access to it. And this agent is learning everything there is to know about it. It knows it's got access to my bank account, my health records, my licenses, my car renewal. It knows my calendar. It knows the limit on dating. It knows the limit I'm not dating. And it knows everything there is to know about. The 11th hour begins now. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you for having me.
Kevin, I'll give you a bit of a background about Kevin. Kevin is Irish and he was born in the rugged West Coast. His early career aspirations, according to his mom, was either priesthood or paramedicine. I can't picture that now, knowing how well I know him today, but anyway. But fate had other plans, inspired by Star Trek, so many of us. He had a particular fondness for the ever-resourceful Scotty. Kevin found his calling in technology, diving into electronic engineering in the 90s. Since then, his journey has spanned continents and industries from medical devices to telecommunications to banking, across Europe, across the States, and of course, across Australia. He's navigated roles in manufacturing, consulting, program delivery, and today he's working on transforming how we do business through technology. Kevin lives by two simple and powerful maxims. It's better to leave a place better than you found it. And if it doesn't have a purpose, it's useless, which I love. With that mindset, he helps shape systems that are not only functional, but meaningful. I can think of no better IT executive to have on this podcast than Kevin Geary. Welcome to the show, Kevin. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. And thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Look, I think it's going to be a great discussion. We've talked a little bit beforehand around this, about the impacts AI is going to have on corporations alike. And there's so much, I guess, in my view, there's so much rubbish that's floating around in the marketplace today. There's lots of clips going around saying AI is going to replace everyone's jobs. It's going to do this. It's going to do this. But there doesn't seem to be any detailed thought behind how and why. When we say AI are going to replace jobs, well, I don't get it. How? And I guess in my view, unless you understand how those roles really work today, and then question can or will AI replace it, you really don't know. So the purpose of this conversation is just to have that chat on the potentials of AI in the marketplace, particularly in corporations, as well as software vendors, and do a bit of a deep dive.
Okay.
So before we start, I just want to give a really quick overview. Even the definition of AI can be ambiguous to some. And I'll give you an example. We've talked about generative AI. We've talked about agentic AI. And in this podcast, we're going to be talking about swarming AI. So I guess the question is really, what the hell is the difference? And it can't get confusing. So very quickly, generative AI is what we use every day. It's the ChatGPTs, it's the perspectives, it's the Groks, and they generate content. You ask them a question, they search the web, they search wherever they're searching, they pull together a bunch of information, they understand what they're then putting in front of you, and you read it, and that's basically it. It's a great source of bringing information together. When we talk agentic AI, that's something entirely different. That is when AI can actually do stuff. An example could be, hey, AI, write me a letter, send an email to Kevin telling him I'm going to be late. Send a text message to Kevin saying, I'm going to be late. Sorry for the delay. I'll meet you at this coffee shop. And automatically has access to my email. Boom, off it goes. So when you look at agentic AI, if it can access my email and do stuff in my email from a perspective of IT, agentic AI will have the ability to look at systems and make changes, configurable changes. It'll be able to write code and then execute that code. So the generative part is the running of the code. The agentic part is the execution of the code. And what happens when code's written? It gets tested. It then talks to another agentic AI model that does stuff. It creates A, B, C, and actually does stuff in that ecosystem. Then we come to swarming AI, which is really, I think, so cool. I just love the name. But it's, when I first heard swarming, I thought, okay, drones. And I saw some examples. I don't know if you've seen this, Kev, but the Chinese had about 1,000 drones in the air, and they're doing patterns in the air. Literally, they were swarming technologies. Did you see that one?
I haven't seen that one, but I have seen the one where there is a collection of drones and it's taken the shape of Darth Vader's head in the night sky. And he's reaching out and you can see his hand reach out with the swarm of drone, and they've synced the whole thing up with his booming voice of Vader in the night sky. And it is this amazing replacement of what we used to do with fireworks. And they're doing it with a swarm of drones.
I love that. I think that is so cool when you look at, the technology that goes into that. So it's one thing to program drones, we'll just say an algorithms to do A, B, C. It's quite another thing. When we talk about agentic and swarming, there are actually two AI, call them bots for this, but AI agents, and they're talking to each other. So in the example of a drone, one drone could say, hey, you're getting too close to me. And the other drone will say, it's because of the wind. Oh, I didn't realize that. We have to make an adjustment because of the wind, but beware, the wind's coming for you all in milliseconds. So you better adjust as well. So when we talk about swarming AI in IT, what we're talking about is multiple AI agents. And remember, each agent can do stuff. It can actually physically do stuff against those systems. And for them to have the ability to talk to one another. And through that communication protocol, they're constantly learning and adapting. So the overall objective is that whatever that overall objective is, which I think is pretty cool. Just to kick this off, I'm going to share with you a quick slide. Let's see here. Can you see that slide?
I can see it, yeah.
So when we think about how big AI is today, we've heard about companies like NVIDIA, Meta, Google, whomever, I guess everyone but Apple really, on how much money they're putting into AI. But this slide does not reflect that. This slide reflects how much money potentially corporations, so this is your everyday corporations, nothing to do with leading edge technologies, are planning on putting into AI, whether it's agentic AI or generative AI, over and above their IT budgets today. And you can see this lead up from basically now, which is 24 billion up to 185 billion. Now, and a lot of companies are just not telling the marketplace what they're planning on spending. So this is really it really is a guesstimate. But when you look at this type of money going to a single technology, I don't know about you, I've never seen this much money being poured into a technology, even at the epoch of the internet. Any thoughts?
No, when the internet was coming around, we didn't need a huge amount of investment. We didn't need a massive amount of compute. We were putting pictures and text in front of people on a computer. And the massive amount of investment was in the home compute. It wasn't around the data centers being put up. You could run a server and you'd have your website, and that was your investment. Whereas today, to get real benefit from AI, you need to have a server farm of GPUs that are pumping away the whole time. And you have to be able to find the power to then drive the electricity to be able to make sure that they're running. So there's this huge amount of capital that needs to be put in today. Now, whether that stays the same or that changes, to your point, all of those estimates are just that, they're estimates.
It's pretty wild when you look at this and you just see the growth in AI and where we're at today. And you just imagine with all the spending taking place just in corporations alone, plus everything else happening into the AI space, you just wonder what 2030 is going to look like. But we're going to talk about that. I just wanted to highlight a couple of quick news clips on some of the impacts that take place today inside corporations. I want to start with the Zuck over at Meta/Facebook. I guess the highlight is Meta, which is a growing company and making billions of dollars, are laying off 4,000 engineers, mid-tier engineers, and they're doing it this year. What Zuck is also saying is they're now using AI to the point where about 30% of all their code is being written by AI. Now, considering the thousands and tens of thousands of developers that they have inside Meta, you think 30% lines of code, we're talking millions and millions of lines of code that are being deployed to production. And that's going through testing, pen testing, performance testing, everything else you need to do prior to it releasing into production. That's a huge, huge amount. And that's just today. What's it going to look like tomorrow? What's it going to look like in 18 months? So that's the first one I want to highlight. The second one is in DevOps. And this is a really interesting one. It was a leaked McKinsey report. And what they did was they examined all the different roles in DevOps. Now, DevOps are really, for those that aren't fully in tune with what DevOps is, these are really the guys and girls who keep the lights going. They're the ones who manage all the systems. They're the ones that keep the systems robust. They're the ones that keep the systems secure. So everything to do with the technical stack, that's what basically they do. And there's 101 different skill sets involved. So, it depends if you're with the AWS cloud as an example, or the Microsoft cloud. You have different types of engineers as an example. So they did this secret survey. They said, well, out of all these roles, you look at a role is nothing more than a collection of tasks. When you bring all these tasks together, right now, what can AI do? I'll start from the Zuckerbergs again.
Cool.
Okay, cool. So in this example, I'm showing you right here in the news headline. Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook basically announced he's laying off 4,000 engineers. This year alone, you can see that they're all mid-level engineers. And this is simply because AI will be replacing their jobs. Meta has undoubtedly thousands of developers. And what Zuck is now saying is basically 30% of all code, which equates to millions and millions of lines of code, it's being written by AI. So this would include testing, full deployment, etc. So that is a huge number to me. So that's happening now. Jump ahead 18 months, you have to wonder what this picture is going to look like. And again, it does make you wonder, we are talk about is Salesforce. So we all know Salesforce. They're a company that's been with us for quite some time. They have a global reach and they're growing. They are making a lot of money and they're consistently growing. What they're highlighting is even to our growth, they're not going to hire any. No more technical hires where it stands today. So I think that's quite telling when we talk about growth and what that means for Salesforce. Any thoughts, Eric, on what I've just highlighted?
So the one that stands out for me, there's two there that I wanted to call out. Salesforce is saying no more hiring unless you can demonstrate that it can't be done by AI. It's not just technical. It's no more hiring, full stop. So can you do content creation through AI? Can you do process automation through AI? And they're really pushing that as a way forward. The other one that I've read recently, so in counterpoint to the piece that Facebook are doing, Google are saying that 30% of their code is assisted by AI. The code that they create, 30% of that is assisted, but they're only equating that to 10% efficiency savings. So there's a number of different stories being told about how cool AI is and how wonderful it's going to make everything and how quickly we're being able to use it. But I do think that the stuff that we're doing with it now bears no resemblance to what we'll be doing with it in 18 months, because what we were doing with it 18 months ago bears no resemblance to what we are doing with it now.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize the 10%, but I guess, when we look at cost savings in a company, you would know best on this, but we don't try and cut costs for a year. We'll say right over the next 5 years, if we can get a 10% efficiency gain, it's going to equal X amount. So, if you have a spend of $1 million and you're saving 10%, I'm just throwing out $1 billion. That's 10% a year,
Yep.
well over 5 years. So there's a difference between 100 million and half a billion.
It's either 10% of money that I've saved that I can put into doing other things, or I've gotten my product out to the market 10% faster, which is a massive lead for some companies, or it's I'm able to do 10% more stuff. I can fix more bugs. I can create more features. I can do more things. And those have, to your point, a cumulative benefit for the company. So 10% doesn't sound like an awful lot. 10% GST, it's not a huge amount of money. 10% on everything you do next year and 10% on everything you do the year after, it soon adds up so that you've got within 10 years, a free year.
Yeah, literally a free year. And the question is, what do you do with the money?
Exactly.
Yeah. What do you exactly? So, okay. So when we get into agentic AI, here's where my mind goes, and it's going to be a little controversial, but I want to hear your reflections on this. But my background, I've been doing this for probably almost or as long as you have now. I started in the mid-90s myself. Here we are, 2025. I'm still doing it. How the time goes. But anyway, when I look at agentic AI, and then I look at the software development process, I look at DevOps, you think an AI agent is to be specific to a set of tasks. That's what a role is. If I'm in a role, what we might call it, I am a full stack developer. I'm a front end developer, because that front end developer, she just does front end stuff. They understand the code that goes in front end, and that's their specialty. So when I look at agentic AI, it's going to be trained on specific roles. So I'll give you an example. I'm a network engineer, and my specialty is Cisco routers. Just throwing it out there, Cisco routers, why not? So I'm envisioning agentic AI is going to learn everything there is to know about every single Cisco router, every single configurable item on that router, and understand how that router works. I'll have another AI who will look at Huawei routers, even though we don't use Huawei anymore, thank God. So you're going to have, I guess my point is, for all these different systems, you can potentially have an AI agent that understands all of these systems intimately. So those are the individual agents. Now, when we jump ahead into swarming, when these agents can actually talk to each other, that to me is a whole new ballgame. And that if I'm part of a project team and I'm deploying code to production, it could be, I don't know, an update to a mobile app, something simple like that. Cool. There's going to be all types of changes. It's not just the code that goes into production.
Yeah.
There could be, differences. We should have to make network configuration changes. We might have to do this. We might have to do that, whatever it might be. So what I'm saying is the agents that know the code understand what will actually know this code intimately. Then you're going to have your other agents who will talk to your AI agents who understand the code, and I'll say, right, this is what's coming into production. Then your production agent will say, oh, you know what? Because of that, we're going to have to make this configurable change. And because we're making a change here, we have to make a change here, and here, and here. So in my experience, the hardest part about project program management is writing the code and the testers and the BAs. It is all of that stuff dealing in the background with the 200 groups, all with their own middle management layer, trying to find time to say, listen, I need you to do all these changes. And for the most part, I don't even know what these changes are. I'm not a network guy. So I try to speak to you, and you got to say, oh, yeah, still, you didn't take into consideration this. It's like, well, of course I did. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about with this. That's your specialty. That's why I'm coming to you. So thoughts?
So human evolution has been around specialization. So we started off as hunter-gatherers, and then there was gatherers who were particularly good at hunting, at grabbing nuts and grabbing fruit, and then other things. And then we developed agriculture, and some people went off and became tool makers, and you had blacksmiths, and you had specialization all the way through. But the communication aspect of that was inherent because we were people. We liked talking to each other. We were the monkeys that could talk. And so we developed all the way through. We've built a society that is dependent on us being able to effectively work together. And that's how we've gone to the moon. That's how we've gotten to where we are. And An agent that can write code is wonderful, and it does really cool things, and it can write some really cool code, but it has to be able to communicate out. And these things are much more effective at communicating with each other than we are communicating with each other or with them. So these agents are able to condense a huge amount of information around, I'm making this change to this piece of code. What does that mean to you? And those other tools then understand, as you said, they understand inherently everything about their space. And they can say, that means nothing to me. Or this piece over here says, oh, well, I have to actually change a piece of routing now because of that change that you're making. And then they, in the same way, broadcast that out. So you have a third or fourth order unintended consequence being mitigated by this, where humans, we wouldn't have even had the second order in that conversation. We wouldn't be able to hold the complexity of the system in our heads. And these ones do it automatically, and they're able to then communicate that back and forth. We've made system changes here where we've changed the firewall and we haven't realized something was connected to it further down the chain, and we've taken out a very important system. These things should never be able to do that. So those problems that we create for ourselves disappear. And there's a huge advantage, both technically, you don't break the system, and from a business perspective, the system doesn't break, though it's still online, to allow us to do that. And there's an opportunity there that's driving, pushing more and more of the responsibility over to the AI. And that's where we start to run into a little bit of a challenge around who's got responsibility and accountability. Can't fire an AI, and you can give out to a network engineer who's recoded your firewall in the wrong way, or he's blocked the wrong port, or she's blocked the wrong port, but you can't do that with the agentic AI, but they should do that infinitely more effectively than we are doing it today as they communicate more effectively.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I do wonder though, in terms of the deployment of these AI agents, the technology is there, right? And/or it's coming. But if I was a software vendor, if I was Cisco, is it in their best interest for them to create the AI agent and then say, hey, hey, company X, use our AI agent to manage this? Or would Cisco wipe their hands cleaning up, just go create your own, do your own self-learning with the AI model? Like if you were sitting in that Cisco space, where would you gravitate towards? What would be your model? Because it's about money at the end of the day.
It is about money, but it's not always about the money that I can make from the sale. I'm from a heavily regulated industry. I've been in regulated industries all my life. So one of the things that's in the back of my mind at all times is, if I break something in production, what is the regulatory impact from that? What are the consequences for my organization, for myself, for our customers, if we break something in that space? So if I break a tool today, people can't claim. When I was working at the banks, when I broke a tool there, you couldn't get your money. That's huge impact. So the conversation that's happening in Cisco and companies like it is, how much agency do I take in this space? Do I create an AI bot that sits on my routers, that does all of this stuff, that communicates with all of the other AI bots, and I have the agency and the ownership of that? Or do I take the safe path and I become the hardware on which everything runs? That's a pretty important piece, because if you do step into that AI space, you're opening yourself up to all of the consequences that sit with that. And you have to be comfortable that you can do it properly. And the question you have to ask yourself is, do I have the capability in my organization to be able to build that out? And can I take myself into that future, or should I maintain the platform that I've got? And that's a different conversation. Cisco will go one way because they are a hardware and they are a routing company, and they've got a really wonderful platform there. Facebook and Google, they have to go into that agentic space. They have to go into that AI space, because if they don't, somebody else will, and that will cut their lunch, and they will be replaced by that other company that comes through and takes over. So it's very specific to who are we as a company and what industries are we playing in.
But is it chicken and the egg? In that Cisco, for them to make better routers, it's, they're an engineering company at heart, and they write a ton of software. Okay, cool. So they're going to be using AI for their software. I think that's a given.
Yep.
But when we talk from an engineering perspective, there are AIs out there that are specializing in chip design. There's electronics. So if they want to stay at par or ahead, they have to deploy their own agents inside their own internal infrastructure. So build what they need to build for the marketplace, or else they're going to be competing with companies that will do it, and they won't be able to compete anymore.
But there is a boundary point at which you go from we're doing it to ourselves in-house to we're doing it to our customers. So, I'll describe it as a restaurant. We've all been at restaurants. We know what it's like. And we've seen what goes on behind the scenes in the kitchen where everybody's screaming at each other. And there's a lot of things going on and it's all very busy. But outside, front of house, it's all calm and quiet and relaxing and everybody's quite comfortable. You can, in these sorts of companies, use agentic AI. You can rev it up as much as you like. You can design your chips, give it to a person for the last part. You can design your software. You can build all of these things. You can test it and you can then release it. What you do in-house is all about how you become more efficient to get your product into the hands of your customer. What you do in front of house is what does the customer see? What do they engage with? And how do then they treat with that product that you've created? And that's where I think it's really important to be deliberate about the decisions we're making, because remember when everybody put a clock on something? The big design thing in the 80s was we put a clock on it. Everybody's saying we should just put AI into it. That'll make it better. It doesn't always make it more stable. It doesn't always make it better. And AI isn't the ubiquitous piece. It does make it better to get it into the customer's hands. But then there has to be a deliberate conversation around, should this be an AI enabled device? Or is it more appropriate to have it as a contained, I want to say dumb, because that's a software enabled, internet pointed or something along those lines, but without AI inherently on it.
I don't know if the choice is theirs. Just thinking about this more in that whether Cisco is making that decision or not, their systems need experts. Experts manage their systems today. You can be a certified Cisco practitioner or, a Cisco engineer, just like you can AWS, Google, whatever, right?
Yep.
So it doesn't matter if to me, whether they make that decision or not, there's going to be some enterprising person who understands that system really well. And it could be you. And it could be, Kevin's sitting there going, oh shit, why don't I just turn this into an agent? And I can go and sell it as my own product. And then you've got Sally down the road and Mike over here and everyone doing that same. So it creates a whole new marketplace for these agents across every system there ever was.
It will. And, the guy who invents Bob's routing agents and puts them onto the top of the range routing systems will be able to run your network for you at a fraction of the cost. But the question will have to be, how far do we go with that? And which systems do we allow in that space? I'm old enough to have seen war games. And when the AI, when the AI decide, and it was an AI at that stage, it was the 1980s, but it was able to do things that we were unable to do. And it came to conclusions that we never envisaged. If we go at scale with this, does it have an unintended consequence? Because as I said earlier, we don't have the capability as humans to be able to game out all the way through on what these things do. And so Bob's routing will have to do that for us. When they create this company, Bob's going to have to think about all of the different things that happen and put in fail safes for, I don't know what's going to happen beyond that point. So we'll just stop there and we'll have it as a fail safe. But as soon as they do that, they will corner the market in new routing. They will corner the market in whatever they do. Because to your point, you've got really good routing from Cisco. You put a really cool agent on it and it will go gangbusters. But Bob owns all the risk then. Cisco doesn't own all the risk. So if the Cisco router blows up, Bob's already got most of the risk there. And it is a risk reward piece at that stage where you're leaning in on technology that right now is a little bit woolly, not 100% that it's really good at what it does. They still hallucinate all the time, but working out how to make sure that those hallucinations are going away. Elon Musk is talking about effectively recodifying all of human knowledge so that Grok is trained on a refined piece. So we will no longer be told that we should put glue on our pizzas to make sure the cheese stays on it, because they'll take that sort of information out. And that's when these things will accelerate even faster, because the trust will be there for people to be able to use them and to be able to put them into those spaces where it's an agent that sits on a router that we never think about, that's never there, and it just works. And that's when all of those companies that haven't done it will disappear. And if Cisco hasn't done it, to use that example, they're gone.
Well, I'm wondering though, when I look at Elon Musk, and yeah, I heard that same statement the other day, and Grok 4 is supposed to be, a huge jump, but I know what you're saying with, the remapping of the future Groks. But there's a couple things here, like that's large language, right? So that's generative AI. And you're right, it does hallucinate. I've got some seriously interesting comments back when I'm using AI, and I've been comparing them against each other, etc. But it says in generative AI, we're talking about agentic AI, which is very, very focused on, large language, I would argue is billions of times larger and more complicated than agentic AI looking at a router.
It, it is, and you're 100% correct. It is much more complicated, but it is still making decisions in an infinitesimally small amount of time to be able to do things. And it's using that based on all of the knowledge it has access to, all of the inferred knowledge it has around the network's topology, around the systems that they're using, around the traffic that's traveling across it, around the requirements that they have, the security standards that they have to adhere to, and all of the availability pieces. So there's still a huge, huge amount of information that these things have to take into context to be able to make those decisions for themselves. That's where I think there's a lot of the risk is that we put version 2 instead of version 3 of the security standard in there, and it left that port unguided, and now we've been breached.
Yeah, so interesting. So when you look at, yes, there's a lot of information being processed. So right now you've got a company like NVIDIA, and they have the GPU chips that are working magic, and they're getting more and more powerful, so you can do more and more computations, I suppose. But to train AI agents, you actually don't need GPU chips. You're looking at, you're looking at more standard, the Intels, the AMDs of the world.
Yeah.
That you could use. And when you look at, like, to me, when I'm looking at, at a system and what the system can and can't do, there's a couple of things here. If I've got a small cluster of chips and I can do half a trillion calculations a second, well, whatever it is, do I actually need half a trillion calculations for it to understand all the configuration needed for a system? So that's one. Two, it's the memory of that chip. Well, right? So if I write 500 pages of a book and I want AI to assess that book, it's got to put in memory all those pages, all those words, understand the meaning of all that, and then come up with a summary. When I get an AI agent that's running on a limited chipset and I've got 10,000 configurable items, it is much, much smaller for it to understand and consume, I suppose, than the large language. And this is in the back of my head. This is why I think, the big jump has been AI, right? That's the technology. But these AI agents, because they're an order of magnitude, you need an order of magnitude less to deploy an AI agent. It's going to be a lot easier. That most companies with decent CRLs will be able to get their heads across this sort of thing and start prototyping it out in a much easier fashion than the AI large language.
And it is a much more approachable technology set. And it's even more efficient than I think the way you've described it there. There may be 2,000 configurations that this thing has access to, or there's 10,000 pieces of information that it has access to make a decision on what it's going to do next. But the question that approaches that agent, or the task that approaches that agent, narrows the field of reference for it very, very quickly. So it doesn't even have to look at the vast majority of the standards and codes that it has. It only needs to look
right away. Yeah.
Instead of going, right, I've got 10,000 things that I need to know. I know all of those 10,000 things, but this question that they've asked only refers to 423. So your processing time is down to, I've seen laptops that can run some of these. DeepSeek is a really good example, but that's agentic. I say that's not agentic, but it really narrows your focus very quickly to be able to run these things on a small virtual machine or a string of small virtual machines where you don't have to do a lot of training. You just give it a couple of documents and away you go. And you're right. There are CIOs, but more and more I'm seeing there are business leaders who are going, that's a really cool thing. I can get it to process
CIOs.
And that's where a lot of the drive is coming from, because CIOs are very much,
what's the state of the CIO world?
The CIO has two things. One is cool new technology and don't break anything.
Yeah.
You know, yes, they are interested. Yes, they are running it, making sure the cool new technology is there. The CIO also has carriage of Hogan, which for those of you who don't know is a 50-year-old COBOL-based system that runs at the deep, dark center of a lot of the banks here in Australia. And the CIO of the bank that you have is worried about the really cool app and how you're going to do AI and all of those sorts of things, and keeping this thing over here alive, because this is the bit that does all of the really deep thinking on your general ledger. Whereas the business teams are going, ooh, cool, shiny new toy. We can go off and do some new stuff with it. And that's where a lot of the innovation is going to be driven from, is this, how do we get this into the hands of our customers? How do we do these things more creatively? How do we get more efficiencies? And they're pushing the CIOs in a lot of spaces to do these things much more quickly and much more aggressively than maybe the CIO might, because he's got to have the whole stack, which is still made up of everything from 50-year-old COBOL-based solutions all the way through to cloudless, cloud-native, serverless, containerized, scaled systems.
That's a mouthful. Jeez. I think I was going to bring up the difference between CIO and CTO in today's day and age, but I won't, because I definitely have my opinion on that, but it's not what it used to be.
No, definitely not.
It's definitely changed, especially for the larger, the larger businesses floating around. Okay, so where does that lead? Okay, so I mean, this is from a DevOps perspective, and I'm going to get into something even more contentious in a second, which is Scrum. But if you were to put your crystal ball on and say, what does this mean for DevOps engineers? 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, dare I say 2035? Do you think we're going to have the teams we're going to have today? Or do you think there's just going to be a whole bunch of AI agents running around, swarming, doing shit? Although we're in the middle.
I've come from a very old-fashioned project management background, and I will do estimates 6 months, 12 months, 18 months out. 6 months, I'm fairly sure I know what's going on. 12 months, I'm kind of making it up. And 18 months, I'm just freewheeling. I have no idea what's going on. In the next 6 months, we will see more and more assisted and agentic AI. So assisted being, it'll recommend code to you. It'll say, here's a bug. Here's the thing you can do about it. Here's the story. Here's the thing you could build with it. This is really cool. And it'll do those sorts of things. And then we'll get into the unit testing, and it'll be, you should do this type of unit testing. This is my agent. He can do that type of unit testing. This is our other agent. She can do the user experience testing for you. And those sorts of things will start to creep in very, very quickly, because those areas have a lot of people in them. And if you can replace those with agents, it makes everybody feel a little bit better. The engineering practice is a little bit more challenging, because you've got people who do coding. And there's this new thing, vibe coding. People will go and do vibe coding, and they'll make a really cool app, and it'll all be really great. For front-end facing systems, you will be able to do a lot of this stuff really, really quick. So you will see huge changes over the next 2 years, 3 years, where the teams will get smaller, your development cycles will get faster, the number of agents will explode exponentially, and the focus will become more and more on the product owner and defining the problem you're trying to get to. That piece will become really important. And then how do you take that narrative all the way through? So the teams go from, 2-person team, let's say 12 people, you go from 12 people down to 4 people, because you've got product owner, a couple of people who need to understand about the business.
Right. What are we talking about, base? Are we talking, next week? Are we talking 2 years, 3 years?
I think it's iteratively over the next 3 years. You'll see the teams going from, say, 12 down to about 4. But I'm being really specific here. I'm talking about front-end SaaS-enabled systems rather than core systems. And I'll come to that in a minute, because there's a big difference with some of these things. So you've got, I need to create a new function in my website, or I need to create a new process in my CRM, or my decisioning engine, my decision system. Those pieces are inherently able to be configured in that way. So you've got sprints, you've got all of those things. And in the next 3 years, the area of opportunity is you reduce your team there significantly, with much more pressure on the product owner, or whatever the role becomes at that stage, because they're going to change the name again, to be able to define what problem they're trying to solve. So the AI agent can go away and code on it, and then the other AI agent can test on it, and they can then release it through an automated DevOps pipeline. So the pipeline will be automated as well, I believe, because we're already doing a huge amount of that. Now,
CI/CD is totally, I get off to that. When you're deploying stuff to prod, it's almost entirely automated. right?
In some areas, and so it should be. If you've got a stable system that you know the bounds of that system, and you've got a well-defined structure, you can go really fast. Agile, the piece that people forget about agile is you can move really, really quickly in that space because you're moving in these small increments, and you can move really, really quickly. But you can only do that if you've got a clear roadmap ahead. If you're running at full tilt and you don't know where you're going, you're very quickly going to run into a brick wall and you'll have built yourself into a corner. If you've got a really good, clear roadmap all the way through, you can run a huge amount faster because you know there are no impediments in front of you. In the same way, if you've got a well-structured system, you can move really quickly with that, and your agents can be able to be left alone effectively, and you can automate a lot of that. But it has to be stable. It has to be well documented and to be well understood. And so too does the way it's going. So one of my roles, I work on a core system. System is 40 years old. It grew organically from a very specific piece of kit out and out and out. And we kept adding to it and we kept adding to it until it is this, I don't think I'm talking out of school, a sprawling monolithic structure that is really problematic to understand. We've got a couple of people who understand bits of it. Nobody understands it all. We've mapped it with AI, but I would never allow AI to be automated across that to do a release for two reasons. It is hugely complicated and we don't have the trust in our depth of knowledge in the system. But secondly, it's a regulated piece. And if the system breaks at some stage going through that process, I have to go to APRA and say, this we did.
Yeah, but that's today's AI. So right now there's a trust factor. It's new technology.
Yes.
Jump ahead 2-3 years. It's no longer new. It's proven itself. And the probability, to me, it's about probability. It's sort of like Elon Musk when he was talking about autonomous cars. I said this in another podcast, but it's not to get autonomous cars perfect on the road. It's to get them to the same error rate or accident rate as a regular driver. So I would argue if you have 5 accidents in your system per year, if AI can do that or better.
So
why would it do it?
Well, if you are talking about a website or an app or something that is relatively easily changed and small and your blast radius is quite small, 100%. Go nuts. Within 3 years, you will be able to build the trust because the consequence factor is much lower. If your app if the button on your app looks a bit funky or it's moved a little bit or it doesn't do what you want it to do, that's not too bad. But if your banking system won't clear your mortgage, your economy has a problem if it's a big enough bank. So there's 2 parts with Elon Musk's feet. Elon Musk's comment around, we're going to have driverless cars next year has been the same statement he's made for about 10 or 12 years.
2006, I don't even know anymore, but yeah.
But the other piece he has said, and you're right, he said it needs to be as good as a normal driver. Now, there's I'm a normal driver. I'm really good at this. I know how to drive. I've never had an accident. And there's I'm a slightly crap driver. Which one is it? But also, not true. His AI needs to be so much better than a normal driver. It has to be safe. It has to be demonstratively safe. We hear all the time about the accidents that they have they've gone down a huge amount, but Wemo in San Francisco and in Texas, you hear about the accidents. You hear about them crashing into bollards and that sort of stuff. They do that. Not a big deal, but they do it. And it gets made into news and it damages their brand and it damages their share price because people want to be able to be 100% confident, not 99% confident. Your mechanism or your opportunity to get it wrong is hugely reduced.
The difference between being accountable from a regulation, there's a difference between being accountable to a regulator and to a system of courts.
Yep.
Or market perception. And what I'm saying is if the regulator is saying for us to certify your car, this is the bar.
Yes.
Acknowledge there could be some accidents, but I think the general public, some of the attitudes, like it needs to be perfect. If we thought everything needs to be perfect before we roll it out, nothing would get rolled out. And yes, no. You look at I don't want to go too much into autonomous cars, and people have died driving autonomous cars. But to me, it's about what they don't say is, yeah, someone died, but we also did 10 million kilometers on the road with this car. Or with cars, one person died while the average driver could be a death per 1 million. I don't know what the stats are. It's not.
No. I 100% get where you're coming from. And I do actually think there's a generational piece there as well. So my generation, there's a trust boundary. Probably the generation after me, there's a lower level, there's a lower bar from a technology perspective. I am very concerned, and I'll use privacy as an example. I'm very concerned with my privacy. I use, multi-factor authentication. I use a VPN. I have burner email addresses, all of those sorts of things. My kids, they don't. I've got 18 and 17-year-old. They are much more open about their privacy. Their privacy settings are very, very different to mine. Their expectation of privacy is much lower than mine from certain perspectives. They don't mind their friends tracking them. I have an issue with that. I think your point there is the boundary for trust is lowering because we think, it has to be 100% because I don't want to get into a car that's really dodgy. And it has to be better than a normal driver is generational as well. You got people like me who are at the other end of their career. And we have this whole mechanism of this is how I've gotten to where I am and all of the baggage that we take. And then you've got people who are starting out going, cool, I want to be able to use that. And I think there's an opportunity. And yet it just needs to be a little bit better than I am for me to use it. And they're much more open to it. And that's where I think where you're coming from is the boundary and the trust process is dropping all the time, along with the acceleration of the change that we're looking at. So you see these sorts of curves where the barrier for entry is going down, the trust levels is going down, and all of the stuff that you can do is just going through the roof. I do see a differentiation. So the front end app, the customer facing app, the piece that's really cool and shiny, that will move a lot faster than the regulated piece because again, there's, and I'm going to use the example, but for the listeners, please forgive me. Old, middle-aged white guys are usually the ones that are in charge. We're a little bit slower on uptaking change. Those are the ones that are in charge of those core systems, those back-end systems. And that's where I see that as going a little bit slower in some areas, but I do see the acceleration hugely in those front-facing, more streamlined apps that are better understood.
Yeah, isn't it funny though? You're right. The guys who do work on, and gals who work on the older systems are older people, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And, you have a bunch of experiences that you bring together and the new stuff. It's younger people, I look at the guys in the UI, UX and design guys or, designers, and they tend to be younger. But I would also just maybe somewhere just, I look at, the difference in generations too. I'm Generation X, right? When shit happens, shit happened. It was called shit. But what we didn't do was scream and yell and cry and I'm offended, I've been hurt, it's not my fault, but because I can't. That's not our generation. Our generation is, shit happens, we move on. While the younger generation, one little thing happens, and I hear it in my kids, I hear it everywhere, it's they should fix this, or they should do that. And my question is, who are they? Where do they live? What are their names exactly? And you tell me exactly what they should do to fix this problem. Is this a problem? And I think lastly, culturally, that's a generation cultural. You and I both live, I'm Canadian, you're Irish. So we're both, I guess we're both immigrants to this country. But I look at Australia too, is very risk averse culturally.
Yes.
In Canada, this is some risk averseness. We are not, hand on my heart, as risk averse as they are here. And you go to the States are even less risk averse than Canadians. And I'm guessing here, I have been to Ireland. I've been to Stab City once. I've been to Dublin once. And from a risk perspective, I didn't see a lot of that going on.
I think there is a certain amount of, it's not so much risk averse, but it is very much, what can we get out of this? And I think it comes down to, there is a cultural inertia. The people that are in Ireland are the people that have gone through and they've got family in that space and they've got that deep connection. I think Canada and America are much more transitory. And it's weird because Australia is much more transitory as well. We are an immigrant population. So unless your family goes back 60,000 years, they go back 200 years. So we have that sort of immigrants, we're going to be the ones going on the frontier. So I find it really weird that Australians aren't risk takers. And I agree with you 100% on that. Whereas Americans are huge risk takers. And I think the Irish are somewhere in between. Yeah. Was it the old adage was, God loves a chancer, or God loves a trier, hates a chancer. But Irish people, there's an awful lot of us that are chancers. And you can see that with some of the guys who've gone from Ireland and they've made it big in Silicon Valley or in Boston and those sorts of areas. And it is encouraged in the States, where I think in Ireland, we don't like people that get above their station. They have notions. And that's where I think you squish that risk-taking mentality really quickly, because you talk about them as though they have tickets on themselves, as the Australians say, when they think they're better than everybody, when they're going to have a crack. It's all poppy syndrome, yeah. But I love the optimism of, and I'm going to talk about Americans as a broad sweeping generalization, and I know I've been doing that a bit. I love the optimism of Americans who, when they approach something, they think they've got a solution that or a better way of doing it, or they know more about it than everybody else in the room. Sometimes they don't, but they crack on anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. And God love them for it. Like, there's a lot of, there's a lot of pros to it, and there's some cons. And, I sit definitely more on the risk taking side. I'd rather do something and ask for permission later. And, I remember a testing manager once told me I was getting stressed out over some really shitty test results, and our timelines were blowing up. This was years and years ago. And he took me aside. He was an old guy. I was a young PM. So, Phil, we're not building fucking parachutes. Looking at him, he goes, if it breaks, it don't matter. We'll fix it. No one's going to fucking die. And I thought, you know what? That was some great advice. And I do look at that from an IT perspective. I'm not managing, nor have I really managed legacy systems like you have, which stands. When you look at going back to the whole DevOps model, going back to system changes, what you do could have an impact on a huge area of population. But let's be honest too, there's only so many banks in this world, so many insurance companies. For the rest of it, for the rest of the corporations out there, they're not in that space. They're making widgets, they're selling widgets. They're not in that. If things break, they break. Yes, they might lose some money, but no one's going to die. It's not the parachute scenario with most corporations.
Samsung sent out a phone that kept catching fire and exploding. Samsung is still one of the biggest companies in the world and makes some of the most popular phones in the world. And their phones used to explode. So if you've got a good product, you've got a huge amount of capital that you could expend on these things. So I used to be in the civil defense back in Ireland, and we had some very clear prioritization metrics. And when we were going through COVID, we were trying to get people out the door in the building here. And I was chatting to, and it was just outside there, I was chatting to a few of the guys, and they said, how do we prioritize this? So it's easy. Is anybody going to die? Is anybody going to get hurt? Is anybody going to get arrested? Is anybody going to get fired? Is anybody going to get in trouble? Are the customers going to be pissed off with us? So, no, we don't do anything where people might die. I said, there's a couple of very small niche areas where we actually reach out to customers in a very specific way who are going through very specific things. And that team is well identified, and they are already out of the building. They're already robust. We've got that sorted. So let's just go down here. We can get some people arrested. So we could do that. And I wrote it up with them. We said, this is your prioritization. If it's down here, we'll work on it. If it's just the customer is going to be annoyed at us because they have a longer hold time or whatever it is, yeah, it's important because the customer is important to us, but it's less important than all of the other stuff that we've got to deal with. That was a really simple way of prioritizing. And so the amount of risk you take up here with something like that is very, very low. The amount of risk you take down here with the customer might be a little bit annoyed is much higher. And you're much more able to take those risks in those spaces. And to your point, the regulated industry is very, very small. It's power, it's banking, it's insurance, those sorts of spaces. The rest of the world go nuts, and they will. You see what they're doing now in the supermarkets. You see what they're doing in some of the, Amazon is a wonderful example of this. They use a huge amount of AI, tell me what I want to buy next. Sometimes they get it wrong. The vast majority of the time they get it right. And I spend too much with Amazon because of it. But that's a really good example of them taking a really good punt on something and having a crack and it going really, really well for them. And the next thing they're going to do is there's going to be a couple of agents that will be able to go away and troll for you in Amazon. And they're already looking at, and I think they've tested some of this. They can go and do purchases for you. They can go and take actions based on key criteria. If it's
personal agentic AI, perfect leeway into what I want to get into next. I want to bring up the Scrum teams for a second here. So on your example, and I'm going to start with the almighty product owner. So you got a product owner, then you got a product manager. For product managers looking at this thing holistically, owners looking at this at the story level. So I'm assuming everyone who's watching this understands Epic's features and stories. But right now, the role of a PO, they assess the market, they look at sentiment, they look at, what can we do? What service product can we release, updates, change, whatever, to give us more money, to give us more saturation, to give us something, whatever that benefit may be. And once they get agreement to that, they integrate their epics, their features, their stories, they prioritize, off they go. What they usually do is they hand it off to some sort of BI who goes to validate it, they write it all up. The deck comes in and they go, we don't understand the story. Expand on it. Did you think about this? Did you think about that? And so back and forth it goes, and it's very time consuming. The tester comes in, well, I can't test this. I don't understand the acceptance criteria. And what's worse is because most countries have now outsourced testing to India and the Philippines, there's a language barrier, and you have a lack of, they have a lack of understanding of the business. It's outsourced. So they don't understand the business that you're in.
And often there's a cultural gap as well around some of the context.
And that is all linked back to your earlier point around great communication. And all of this takes time we've all been there, right? So we're trying to create a perfect Scrum team, but these are the real things that hit the Scrum teams that, have an impact on overall velocity. The small things and the big things. Well, I think a lot of CEOs say our governance is we change the governance and everything else will fall down. And it doesn't happen now. It really does from best practice bottom up, in my opinion. Yes, you need to good governance, but to me, it's finding ways how teams need to communicate really effectively with each other.
Yeah.
Now going back to the PO, and I'm envisioning where, everyone's going to have their own personal AI agent.
Yeah.
As an example. An example I gave before was open an email and send it to Kevin at the start of this. That's my own personal agent. Now, this agent could be proprietary to me. No one else has access to it. And this agent is learning everything there is to know about me. It knows it's got access to my bank accounts, my health records, my licenses, my car renewal. It knows my calendar. It knows the limit I'm dating. It knows the limit I'm not dating. And it knows everything there is to know about. And I'm not talking for, I'm talking over a period of time. And they can actually profile me. I can then say, hey, Mr. Agent, am I narcissistic? Am I a prick? Am I this? You tell me, based on, go to your research of everything about my actions. What type of person am I? Am I selfish? Am I greedy? Am I loving? And I can actually come up with a independent assessment, of myself. Something is copyable, because there's no people involved. They can give it to me black and white, whether I want to hear it or not.
And it's based on your actions rather than your opinion or your feedback or anything.
Exactly. But it could take everything into consideration. It can actually look at all of my AI requests through generative AI. I can ask AI 10 questions a day. Now, I ask AI 10 questions a day over the course of 6 months. It's going to paint a picture where my interests lie. What do I care about? What do I don't care about? If 25% of my questions are about fishing and boating, that's painting something about me versus 25% of my questions are going towards AI and, I don't know, blockchain. It's a very different picture. So you look at the role of a PO, what I'm envisioning is these POs, an agentic PO can go to the market and gain sentiment. It can look at your products. It can look at your competitive products, who's doing what. It can read trends from here and there and it can come up with a view. Now, if I'm a larger corporation, I could, as a business model, I could say, I'm going to license my AI to Kevin. Kevin's going to pay me $5 a week for my AI. You can't see my bank accounts. You don't have access. You don't even know who I am. What you do know is I'm a 50-year-old white male, blah, 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 demographically. So it gets rid of all of that. And I'm now making an income by licensing my AI.
Yep.
Come along and say, right, I want to license this great big AI that has 100,000 personal AI agents in there with all of this data.
Yeah.
This AI agent knows that I'm already a customer. So all of a sudden, this agentic AI is now saying, I want to create products and features. What do the users really want? And when they put all of this together, I'm talking 5, 6, 7 years from now, they are then automatically writing stories and they are doing a prioritized backlog. There is no more BA. You have an overseer in the PO world. And all of a sudden, the developers are coming. It is written in a way where the developers go, I understand this. Or my developer AI is saying, we need more detail. Fix this. And they're talking and they fix. And then we update the acceptance criteria so that AI testing agent can say, I can test this, but wait a minute, I can't test this. I can test it from a pen perspective, from a performance perspective. I can test it from a system perspective, but I don't understand how this works from an SIT perspective. And in unit, something like that.
Yeah.
So all of it's happening in milliseconds. In milliseconds. And all of a sudden, I'm going to throw it. And now I want to throw something else in here, blockchain. The blockchain, let's forget Bitcoin and all that stuff. I guess we're talking smart contracts.
Yes.
Smart contracts are sitting in the middle saying, right, this is our control mechanism to release something into production. So when all the AI agents, and that includes the release AI agents, the pipeline agents, all of them are saying, yep, check. We double checked all our configuration. We're making these changes everywhere. We've tested it. It's all good. It goes onto the blockchain. And when all those conditions are met, boom. And adding one more component to that, what we tend to forget about in IT, and it drives me nuts. I really see it everywhere I go. It's what's the impact of change? So we're releasing a new service. It's right. A new service, a new product. Have the call center been trained? Well, no, cares about them, right? Of course, no, we don't need them. Have we traded new processes to take in the new IT that we're rolling out? No, it doesn't matter. IT will sort that out. How about comms? As a marketing team, been made aware of this. How does this communication flow into, and what I'm also seeing are AI agents in all those other areas that are all part of that blockchain checklist. And then now created, each one has their own plan of action to release something into production. And this is where, I guess what I'm saying is, this is the death of Scrum as we know it today. And there'll be overseers in the immediate future, but jump ahead to 2035, if not earlier. I don't think there'll be any Scrum team left in companies that embrace this technology. That's where I think it's going.
And it's companies that embrace this technology, but the companies that don't embrace this technology, that don't jump into it, will be left behind, and they will disappear over time. Because I think, like companies that didn't go onto the internet, they went away. In the same way, companies that don't,
they're so far gone.
Yeah. I mean, Kodak is a really good example. They didn't invest in this new technology of digital cameras. They hid it for a long time, and they got eaten by everybody else.
I got a story for that after.
But the one thing I do want to draw your attention to is we've got demographic information from, Facebook, Instagram. We used to get it from Twitter, all over the place. And you can say, I want 35 to 45-year-old men in this area who are of this ethnic background, right? We can give the criteria to the teams, to the marketing guys, and now I want to be able to get all of their information and blah, 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 blah. And it's anonymized and normalized and all of those things. And we can dump it in and we can make inferences from that. And we use reporting and we use a lot of systems. Now, your example, you get richer data, you get more data, and you have the opportunity to refine that data much more quickly and much more in depth and make much more real-time inferences from that. So you go faster to go from what does the customer want through to we can give it to the customer. Now, here's the thing. What do customers want? Customers always want a faster horse. And I've had this conversation so many times with people where I need to do this process faster. I said, you don't need to do the process. You need to get the outcome at the end of it. So you don't need a faster horse. You don't need a horse. You need a catapult, or you need something else. And for about 99% of what we do all day, every day in technology and across the organization and across most businesses, what you've described is perfectly reasonable. It is a perfectly reasonable way forward where you have an AI monitoring your intent. It creates all of those epics and all of the different bits and pieces. And you've got your smart contract tracking your progress all the way through that. And it allows you to curate the gates across every aspect of that process to be able to release the new pieces of information. And then it goes out into the world. And again, you've got an evidentiary trail to say, this is the way we made the decision. So when we go to the board, or when we go to the risk team, or we go to whomever, we know exactly how we got to where we are, and it's all there laid out in black and white, because we can't do that today. Why did you do the thing? I don't know. It felt like the right thing to do. Oftentimes is the go-to-markets team's response to these sorts of things. But that's how we got Nokia. So Nokia surveyed their customers, and I've spoken to the guys who were in the team doing this. They surveyed their customers, and their customers loved Nokia phone. The battery was wonderful. Have a keypad, really great. I can do Snake on it. It's wonderful. Everything's great. I've dropped it 15 times. It hasn't exploded.
Cool. It was cool. Yeah, I like Snake. Yeah.
Your model there doesn't have that creative or intuitive or just that certain spark that goes, smartphones. Just get rid of the keyboard. Get gone. Apple would never have been created through that process. And it is, it's 0.1% of everything we do.
AI does not have imagination. And
yes,
and that's what you need. But AI today does not have imagination. I full-heartedly agree with you. AI tomorrow, I would argue, will. So I've heard a great analogy. Ask AI to create a blues song for you today. It can create a really cool blues song to the detriment of live artists, which is a bit of a shame. That's the reality. Ask AI to create a new genre of music. It'll never create a new, sorry, I shouldn't say never. It cannot today create a new genre of music. So my argument is, again, I'm trying to see past today's lens. Again, assuming there's an exponential improvement in AI, which I haven't seen any evidence to say that won't happen. That, again, jump ahead 3, 4, 5 years from now, what be like? And I know it's a guess, but
if you follow the bouncing ball on that one, and I'm going to put my pessimist hat on for a minute.
Go for it. Bring it up.
Because I try and make sure I'm not a pessimist, because, Irish people are generally quite pessimistic, broad sweeping generalization. So I try and be optimistic, but I'm going to put my pessimist hat on.
Yeah.
So you got a team today of 12 people, and that team today, they keep coffee shops and pizza delivery guys and all sorts of people employed because they do a job. And tomorrow, say 2020, 2027, 2029, 2031, there's 2 people in there because we've got 2 product owners. 10 people are gone. They don't have a job. They're out the door.
There's no more thought. Yep.
Nobody's buying coffee or pizza. Nobody is buying the product that the 2 people that are left are selling either, because they don't have any money. They are actually unemployed, and they're out. So everything you've described, I 100% agree. We are going to get there. We are going to do that. We're going to get there a lot faster. We're still going to need plumbers. We're still going to need electricians. All of those sorts of things are still going to be there. But knowledge workers like myself and yourself are going to have a very difficult time. Chancellor Gorkin said, there is a bright new future coming, but those of us in this generation have the hardest time in living in this. He was talking about a change from, war with the Klingon Empire to peace. I'm talking about moving from the way we work today to the way we might not work in the future. And is it a utopian post-scarcity environment where AI is this benevolent overwatch that allows us to have everything we need to a certain extent? Or is it, here's your bare minimum. You don't get educated because you don't need to be educated. You don't need a college degree. You don't need any of this sort of stuff. You get healthcare. We'll give you some food, and just, try not to get in the way of the productive people. Those 2 things happen. And we see that trajectory starting in certain aspects of what's going on today. You see the way the US is going, and you have a migration of the wealth to a smaller and smaller cohort of the population, and the people further down the food chain are getting less and less of what happens. Trickle down economics has been proven not to work. Is that the way we go? And does that put a handbrake on the development of these things, or at least the rollout of these things, because of the economic strife that they cause and the changes? So does the government go, hang on, this is a bad thing, handbrake? And is it a united government? Is it
you know what, to me, that's not even that's almost esoteric to me, simply because you can have the worst government, you can have whatever government you want. The idea that a government has the power to stop it. It was from, you know what it reminds me of? Back in Canada during, the trucking protests for COVID.
Yeah.
Trudeau said, I'm going to confiscate your Bitcoin. Like, she can say whatever the hell he wants. She doesn't have the power to confiscate Bitcoin.
Even if you did, you'd have to find it first.
Exactly. He's going to have to get the keys. So unless you're going to beat someone over the head to get your Bitcoin keys, you're not going to get it. So the idea of, and what happens? Australia says, how do you do that? We ban AI, or we slow down AI, and then the Chinese
Genie's out of the bottle. No, you're right. Look, the genie is out of the bottle in this aspect, and we are off the cliff at this stage. The edge has arrived. We're off it, and the thing that we need to figure out now is how do we want to land? Do we want to land in a post-scarcity environment where we're using this technology to decarbonize the ocean, to clean the atmosphere, to make sure that anybody that's born into this world has the opportunity to expose themselves to knowledge? Or are we going to have it as a small group of people are going to have all of the advantages? And this is where I think I'm going off on a tangent, I know. Yeah. But it's something that we need to start thinking about now, because your point, those 12 people today that are doing that work, they're going to be 2 people in 10 years time, or maybe 5 years time. I don't know, but that is a huge acceleration for us. And the companies, there is, in my lifetime, going to be a company that is worth $1 trillion and has 1 person in it, because they have to own it.
Well, that's the goal right now. I was listening to Moonshot, and there's a running bet on who's going to be the guy or girl who's going to create a $1 billion business by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, it does, without going too deep into this, I look at the Industrial Revolution, where, you had 100 people in a field. All of a sudden, the combustible engine is created. There's a tractor, we went from 100 to 2. So what happened to all those workers? They went to cities and they started working machinery. So we replaced strength. We replaced physical work machines.
Yep.
But they had a place to go. So we created this information ecosystem. I remember the old pictures in World War II. You see 100 women, 500 women all in a room. You're all typing away.
Yeah, the typing pools.
Yeah, very, very manual. And so that's gone away. My question is fundamentally to ask your question, where we're now replacing intelligence, and we are replacing intelligence. Where do you go from there? But I guess the bigger question for me is, again, looking at it more from a tech perspective, what does it really mean for corporations and or software vendors? Now I want to place another scenario for you on the software side of things, which I think it dawned on me that, again, I'm playing around with AI, and I could literally get AI to create me a simple game. You can write the code of a simple game in a matter of minutes, right? I'm playing a game. How long did it take? How many people did it take to create Pong in the 70s? It was a lot of people, a lot of money, and now you can do it.
And time, huge amounts of time. There are games that have been in development for 10 years. There's tens of thousands of people working on game development. And once you create that basic engine, you should be able to accelerate that development. You should be able to create those. I created a policy update solution for name change. It took me about 3 minutes. Now, obviously, you have to hook it into a couple of APIs, but you could do that, let's say, another 5 minutes. The software development cycle goes mental, and your ability to create software and to create new bespoke software becomes much more in control of the user, is there an opportunity where you don't have large software vendors anymore?
Okay, so to that point, what I'm seeing is if I can do today, what you're highlighting, what I'm highlighting, that's today. Exponential, right? Tomorrow, I want something a little more sophisticated. And then the next day, I want something a little more sophisticated. Jump ahead 5 years. What's stopping me from saying, hey, AI, I want you to analyze all the features of Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint. I want you to create an app that does everything those apps do. Because that's not IP. The code is IP. But if I want to create a word processor and bold something, underline something, and do a grammar check, that stuff is open. What's stopping it from creating these type of personal applications for me with streamlined code? And then on top of that, more an AI agent knows me so well to have a UX guy come around and saying, well, we should do it this way and this way and this way. It knows me. It knows the UXs I like and I don't like. And guess what? So if you create a version, if I say deploy 2 versions, one for Kevin, one for me, yours could look different than mine. Even our own personal tools that have cost me nothing more than, let's say, $1 in energy. And it's been deployed to my production environment, which I don't give a shit about. I mean, it could go down, whatever, but my desktop or laptop. And so when I throw that away and you think, okay, what's stopping companies? And companies have done this today. Instead of them outsourcing this component and this component, companies say, we'll just build their own because now it's so easy, so cheap. We'll just do it. And all of a sudden, these vendors, with some of them have some crazy, licensing models, you just shake your head about is going on because, they haven't bought balls. And all of a sudden, you've got these companies that are on a global scale, the pennies dropping, where they can create their own solution with these AIs. And where does that leave the vendors?
To your point, it's happening today. So Google, what was it? Facebook wanted to buy Snapchat because they had some cool new functions that Snapchat had just brought out. And it was like, oh, we should definitely have that. Let's buy them. And Snapchat said, no, we think we're all right on our own. So Facebook went away and went, well, we can just replicate that functionality. And it took them time and engineering time, and it took them a lot of development and testing and all of those sorts of things. And then they released it, and they didn't care about Snapchat anymore. And Snapchat is still somewhere in the halfpenny place in comparison with Facebook. To your point, there's nothing stopping us in 5 years' time from being able to do that. And walking down the street going, oh, I like the way they've done that. I'm going to take that. I'm going to create my own version of it. And then I'm going to take that to market too. So the idea of competitive advantage in that creative idea, that's going to be hugely deprecated by this sort of thing. Because if you come up with this really cool new way of doing something, you've got an advantage for a couple of days or a couple of months until somebody decides they want to copy it. And then all of a sudden you have this explosion in whatever cool new idea that you had replicated across the entire space. So the whole economy gets reshaped hugely because you don't need Pega and Salesforce and those sorts of areas who are doing really amazing things right now. But if I want to do those really amazing things, I'm just going to take the idea and I'm going to replicate it in a code base that I built myself. And the only barrier is how much compute can I get out of it?
That's exactly it. So when we talk about jobs and, moving forward in the tech space, when you combine all these AI agents and what we talked about from a corporate perspective, you then look at the software industry as a whole. Some companies will go, some will rise, some will fail. They will all change over time. It does make me think where, I've got a 13-year-old daughter. I've got 4 kids. My last 3 adults, I got a 13-year-old. I'm still in school. If I had to advise her, which I guess that's what type of job should I be thinking about for tomorrow? So I should give you some quick background too. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. I'm writing a book about AI. It's called The 11th Hour Event Horizon. So it's not about the impact of technology. It's what's going to impact healthcare, education, logistics, retail, etc. And it's not just AI in isolation. It's AI in partnership with the blockchain, with smart contracts. I won't even get into quantum computing. on that revolution will do to imagine AI on quantum computing. Like that's a whole different. That's a podcast for another time. And so when I'm looking at all these industries, I'm thinking, well, you can see because I'm deep diving into the tasks of the roles themselves, and you can see what tasks will be, wiped off the face of the earth, and what tasks won't be or can't be. It really does paint a picture, I suppose, on the future. And honestly, outside of telling my daughter today, there's two things to do for my daughter. Become an AI expert. And then based on that, I actually think the jobs of tomorrow is going to be entrepreneurship. It's not going to be a job. So that's one. And or if that's not you, to a nurse. Simple. Because we're going to need more nurses because nurses touch humans. They take care of humans and AI cannot do that. It never will.
And they talk about replacing radiologists. They don't talk about replacing nurses.
No, nurses, in fact, I've got stats on that one. It's going to significantly grow leaps and bounds. But anything to do with, anything to do reading in terms of the medical, if you're reading the charts and that sort of interpreting, posting. But anyway, that's a different topic. But it does make me think, how do you advise your kids today where I've never had that problem before? So there's always been, 20 years ago, become a lawyer. But that become an accountant. God won.
Yeah. So one of the things, so I've said this to a couple of people that I've had this conversation with my dad. When I was leaving school, the job I was getting ready for wasn't the job I was going to do. The job I'm doing didn't exist.
Yeah.
So my role has always been to sit between the technical people and the business people and translate. The business has the thing they want to do. I can make it sure that the technical guys can do it. The technical guys have a new cool tool. I can make sure that we figure out what the purpose is, what the value is, and I'll bring that to the business and we'll be able to take advantage of that. And the way I've done that is storytelling. I can tell a story. I can communicate with people. I can build a rapport with somebody. I can understand their needs and their wants, and I can extract that to be able to then build a response to that.
You're to be able to Irish trait right there. Storytelling is your number one trait on that.
It is. We talk for a living. And I say this to my friends at home. One of the things I'm really good at is I can ask a lot of dumb questions. I can synthesize the data and then be able to create a really good narrative around it. And I've always said to both of my children, one of them is going into biomedical science. She's studying that right now. And the other one wants to do something either in politics or teaching or something around that space. And one of the things that I've said to them is there's a couple of things about being employable. You have to be able to tell a story. You have to be able to own and tell your own story, whatever that is, whatever space you're in, you have to be able to tell that story. You have to be easy to work with. I'm amazed at the number of times that you've got somebody who has qualifications out the wazoo, who knows exactly how to do the job, and they are wonderful at being technically accurate doing the job. But nobody likes working with them, so they never go anywhere. They always find that space and they just live in that world. The people that are successful most of the time are actually quite personable. They are reasonably engaging and they want to help out. I've listened to stuff that Sam Altman has done around some of the interviews he's done, Sachin in Microsoft. These are people who are hugely successful and they seem like relatively nice people. They own their narrative and they've created the narrative. They've been able to tell a really good story. They've been able to understand the context of what's going on and be able to play it back in a way that makes sense to people. And they generally seem to be liked by the people that are around them for the most part. Steve Jobs had a couple of different issues with him, but he had Wozniak there to sort of soften him as a person. And that was really effective for him. But be engaging, be likable, be able to tell a story, be able to understand, be curious around what's going on around you.
If we assume a baseline today of 100 could be anything you want from a tech worker's perspective, what's it going to be in 2 years from now? What's it going to be in 5 years from now? How do you see it right now? Do you see it going up or down? Or where do you see it? Based on our conversation with DevOps, Agentic AI, swarming, Scrum, etc. Agentic AI, HR, Agentic AI in call centers, the whole thing. So you put all that together, what does that mean to you? What's your summary?
Tech people, non-tech people. So over the next few years, the number of people who are exclusively tech people will shrink, potentially by an order of magnitude. The number of people that are technologists, that talk about being technologists, that develop code, that work on systems, that do those sort of things, that will shrink hugely and very, very quickly. But the non-technical people will not grow. So I actually expect there to be a smaller second class, third class in the space where you've got people who are working in business spaces, they're an accountant or a lawyer or whatever it is, and they become very technical in how they think, in how they work, and they engage with technology in a much deeper way, maybe through a chatbot in an AI space, it may be through some really cool Alexa, but the number of people in tech, hugely reduced. The number of people using tech in every aspect of their day and the penetration of technology in that space is going to be huge. So the technical skill set that people have will go up, not by a huge amount, and their reliance on technology becomes a huge amount more. And I'm going to say this and it makes me sound like a really old man. Kids these days are hugely dependent on their phone because it's effective and it's useful and it has value. There's maps, all of their wallet stuff is in there, their credit cards, their loyalty cards. That's the sort of thing that we're going to see. We're going to see much more reliance on that agentic AI piece because it's going to do more for us. It's going to be more valuable for us. It's going to be more powerful for us, but we're not going to need the technologists as much as we used to. And so those deeply technical people are going to go away.
So what does that mean from a, when I look at countries like India, Philippines, these are the countries that we've outsourced to, they have literally millions of kids in schools today, developers.
Yep.
With millions and millions. And this is why my mind's going. I think the jobs of the future is entrepreneurship. So I think the only way is for these younger, the younger generation to pick up AI, understand how it works, and then come up with a friggin' new widget using AI that can make them some money in one way or another. Because I don't see them following down that traditional path of I'm going to work for some large Indian outsourced company and we're going to.
I was at A&Z 8 years ago and we were starting to right shore. So I worked in the offshoring space. We would move things to India, to China, to Manila, and we were doing a huge amount of that. But then we started to bring some of these things back because robotics was becoming much more effective for us. Machine learning was becoming much more effective. And those were the first jobs that they went after. It was, well, we've outsourced this because it's repetitive, because it's easy to be a documented task. We can actually create a sequence from it. We could roboticize that and just put it over here. We'll do that. So you start to see a shift in the employment base in those sorts of countries into that more high-skilled technical space. And you start to see that very, very quickly. But to the point you just made, those roles start to disappear really quickly over the next 5 years. Over the next 3 years, you're going to see a huge drop in those sorts of roles because you don't need to employ 10 developers. So you can afford to have one developer in Australia or in America or wherever and have 10 agents or 50 agents or 100 agents working with them.
Yeah.
So you don't need the people elsewhere to be able to do it. And to your point, it's that entrepreneur who has the idea in the first instance is the one that's going to be using the agents. It's not a developer. It's that entrepreneur that is sitting there going, I just had a really cool idea and I'm going to work with these agents and then I'm going to put the thing out there and I'm going to create value in that way. So I don't need to do it. Your location becomes agnostic almost instantly.
Well, it's interesting the example that you gave of the outsourcing and bringing it back. I'm going to do another podcast on this one. And of course, you're welcome to join. In my mind, I'm thinking, why do we outsource to begin with? Cheap labor, right?
Wage arbitrage.
Yeah. So we send it all overseas. Now we have this rise of AI. We have this rise of robots or robotics, I should say. So I can literally, I'm in Australia now. We're both in Australia. I can now make a shirt and pants as cheap as the Chinese company can because they're removing their workforce from the assembly line and they're using robots. So what is stopping the country from bringing back all this manufacturing using the same dead robots that China's doing? And all of a sudden, manufacturing is picking up and we're getting back to self-reliance. Of course, the impacts, like China's much more manufacturing, while India's much more service oriented. But I think the impact of this de-globalization that's taking place is going to be massive globally, but I think it's going to be a bigger hits over there than it will over here.
I agree with you on that point. I think there's going to be more detrimental impact on third world, on the poor and those sorts of underdeveloped countries. But And at some stage, have a read of this. It's about Engel's pause. So in this and into the 1800s, at the start of the Industrial Revolution, living standards didn't change. So you had this huge acceleration in productivity. You had this huge investment in capital, this takeoff in the amount of things that we were able to do. So we were replacing those 100 people in the field with 2 people in the field. We were creating steel mills. We were creating mines. We were creating all of this new technology across the world. And for about 50 years, the living standard of people in real terms didn't change across the globe. Now, obviously, things have changed. And we're probably going to go through this much, much quicker because of the nature of the technology and the economy we have right now. But I think that bump that you're talking about where things go down before we actually get to a point where everything's quite good, I think that's going to happen, and it's going to happen across the world. We're seeing some of that already today. You know, you've got the 9,000 people leaving Microsoft. You've got Facebook and Meta displacing a huge number of people, AWS doing the same. That's going to have ripples all the way through the economy over the next little while we reshape. But it will impact people who have less, and the richer countries are going to do better. And because we're positioned to be able to take advantage of these things, we have that entrepreneurial mindset. We have a well-educated population. We've got, to a certain extent, a risk-taking population in some areas, more so than others. We are better positioned to take advantage of all of these things and to use these tools to make ourselves a better way forward.
I just thought of maybe closing note on that one too. When you look at 2 things, but the third world countries, from the jobs perspective, the outsourcing perspective, see a decline. But I think where they're going to benefit is, I think where AI will benefit them quicker than here will be things like healthcare. We won't find replace doctors tomorrow with healthcare because we're scared of the diagnosis. But in a third world country where there are no doctors, they'll roll it out because it's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing.
So why not? So I think in that way, it will assist them. And I think the bigger problem from a systemic perspective, and this is where the States, I don't know where we haven't learned from the Americans in this one area. They have the most amazing capital markets. You give an idea, you can go and get money for your idea, and they will punch. You've got these all over the place, and they will give money to God knows how many different groups of people, all for a punt. And who we kidding? 9 out of 10 fail. There are VCs in Australia. I've tried speaking to them. And when I was in a startup over here once and spoke to a couple of angels, and their idea of a VC was, we'll give you $500,000, but it's a personal loan to you. It's convertible to shares, but if it fails, you will get $1 million. That's not what a VC is. No. All over the world, you have really poor capital markets because of really shit regulations. And if you loosen up these regulations and let's move away from trying to protect everyone's money to, you know what? If you want to take your money, you want to take your registered retirement saving fund and put it into cryptocurrency and Bitcoin as your choice, off you go. Or you could put it into funds. So I know I'm taking quite an extreme view on this, which I do have Bitcoin in my super for full transparency. But if they can open up the capital markets, particularly in countries like India, so when these jobs start losing, particularly these IT jobs and the services job go away from India, there are avenues for Indians to raise money. So entrepreneurship can really start to rise. And in a country of 1 billion people, they don't need to sell it to the rest of us. They can create their own little widget and just sell it to a neighborhood in Delhi that has 2.5 million people. And that's just one neighborhood. So why not?
No, well, my last thought on that, the biggest advantage Americans have over the rest of the world is their optimism and their bankruptcy legislation. You can go bankrupt in America and be back at the top of your game in 2 years. The US president is a great example of that. He's been bankrupt 6 times and he's the most powerful person on the planet. That's their superpower, is their ability to take risks and wipe the slate clean.
And on that note, Kevin Geary, thank you very, very much. Always a great conversation. I hope to have you back. And that is myself, Philip Grech, signing off on the 11th hour.
Thank you.